And welcome back, and we're moving into our first segment for the morning, and then again a very important topic: Caribbean Caring and Interconnection Forum. CARPIF? Yes, these guys are in with us. We've got actually Bevil Wooding. He's no stranger to us. He's actually the Caribbean Outreach Manager, American Registry for Internet Numbers, and Shernon Osepa. He's in with us as well, Regional Affairs Manager for Latin America and the Caribbean at Internet Society. Guys, good morning and welcome. I'm loving that suit, my brother. It's nice to have you guys in. And the conversation actually during the commercial break, very interesting, sir. There's a lot we need to touch on. But let's get down to CARPIF.
All right.
Expand on that for us, please.
Well, you want to go, Shernon?
Yes, okay. Basically, like 6 years ago, Bevil and I, we were discussing how can we continue to focus on, let's say, economic development in the Caribbean. We have lost, let's say, our bananas industries and all these sugar industries. So we were looking for ways, how can we continue to focus on economic development? And we came out with this Caribbean Peering and Interconnection Forum. It's a forum whereby we will be focusing on economic development, coming with all the big players and see how we can develop the local internet economy. So that's basically the main objective of what we're trying to achieve.
Year 1 to year 6, can we expand on that? What are we seeing so far?
Basically, there are some great developments going on. I mean, if you look at the wider Caribbean, much more people are being connected to the internet, yes. but still we are not there. If you look at the global, let's say, internet penetration, still 54% of the global population is not connected to the internet. And if you look at the Caribbean, that's 56. So that's a bit more above average. So still we have to do a lot to get more people connected to the internet. And it's not only to get people connected to the internet, because when you are not connected to the internet, you only will become much more poorer. Because, for example, someone who is not connected to the internet, he or she, let's say, needs to go to do some, let's say, online transactions. Then he or she needs to, let's say, take a bus, go to a bank, you know. So all these will cost, make that particular person that already doesn't have much resources much more poorer. When someone who is connected can just go online and do that transaction. So that is why we are focusing on getting more people connected to the internet.
You guys were saying that this year you were focusing on two things: cost and delivery of service. That was the focus this year. Could you talk to us a little bit more about, could you unpack that a little bit more for us?
Sure, and I wanted to do that by building on what Shernon has been saying. So he described a scenario in which we have a region where more and more people are going online, and more people understand what the internet means in terms of basic values. So we think in terms of internet, Facebook, internet, Google. But these are companies that are multi-billion-dollar international companies that have built economies around their services. Shernon described the situation where the Caribbean is losing its grip on some of its traditional economic pillars, the agriculture sector, the natural resource sector, even the tourism sector. And when you look at that trajectory, you see the world moving in a direction where the digital economy is the more dominant economy. And not just the internet, the things that are enabled by the internet are driving the global economy. And so competitiveness in today's world is connected to interconnectedness, is connected to technology. So you can't conceive of a national development plan without considering a technical infrastructure development plan. You can't conceive of economic development without considering internet development. That's just the reality of the modern world. So any push to get people online is not just a push to get people to consume technology, it's a push to get people to use the technology to create economic and social value. And that's a message that you don't commonly hear inside of the equation around why do we need to get online. So many people think, well, what's all this push about? I am quite happy not being online. Not understanding that not being online means you have to go further for services, you have to wait longer for redress, you have to take more time to deal with the ordinary, mundane, prosaic aspects of life. And so we're trying to link that economic and social reality that is taking place across the world with the realities of and the imperatives of development right here at home. So you would see a case where your telecommunication service providers are investing and promoting build out fiber to the home, faster, better broadband.
Yeah.
And we see it, and we know that there's something compelling them to move in this direction. And there's an economic incentive for them, the profits that come from people's appetite for the internet. But there's another part of that equation that is not being emphasized, and that is the economic opportunity that comes from getting online. To realize that opportunity, other things need to happen.
Yeah,
Right? And that's what CARPIF discusses, the other things that need to happen.
Wow.
That's a business literacy that is a difficult one for colonial and Caribbean people, because we are, for the most part, consumers. We only look at the product from the standpoint of not necessarily how to repackage it to make money, but look at it from the standpoint of it's here.
Yeah.
Let's use it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why not use what already exists, right?
Yeah. But I wanted to talk about the aspect of cost. Recently, we've had a tax on internet services,
data.
and data. And so, how does Belize fare off in terms of the cost of internet as compared to the Caribbean?
Well, that's something I can actually answer in a very objective way, because there was a study that came out last week, an international study that was looking at internet speeds and costs for the access to internet services globally. And there was a spotlight done on the Caribbean, and that's certainly for the countries that were participating in that survey. And Belize ranked in the lower third of that survey in terms of Caribbean countries.
Lower third?
Lower third, close to the bottom actually. But there was
close to the bottom?
Very close to the bottom. But the interesting thing about the statistic was Belize showed the greatest growth year on year, 2017 to 2018, in terms of price and speed.
Made some steps forward.
They made some steps forward relative to last year, but they didn't make as fast a step or as large a step as they needed to make relative to what everybody else was doing. And that's the key thing. So even in progressing, there is a pace that you have to maintain to be relevant to where the global economy is going, to where even the regional economy is going. And Belize did not keep up with that pace.
Where are we? Because this is alarming, because you're listening to the ads, you're listening to the commercials, and you feel that you are actually getting value for money. Where are we supposed to be amongst the Caribbean, this country, Belize?
I think basically it depends, again, if you're focusing on economic and social development. Let me just touch base a bit on what we call broadband. Most of the times, especially providers, they are talking about broadband. But I think we need to focus on awareness, especially working with let's say, consumers, to educate them to what is broadband in reality. Because most of the times, these providers, they are telling you, they are selling you broadband, but in reality, what they're selling you is not broadband. It may be high-speed internet, but it is not broadband. There are a few definitions out there by global, let's say, organizations defining what is broadband. And if you have a speed lower than 2 megabits per second, then we cannot be talking about broadband. But a lot, I'm not talking about Belize right now, generally speaking. A lot of
Don't
these,
be afraid to speak about
you should,
because you're
yes,
here.
yes, well, of course. I mean, we'll look at the region, So a lot of these operators, they're telling you we are selling you broadband, but in reality, they are not selling broadband. So that is why I think we do have a role to play, especially to focus on awareness, to raise awareness with the consumers in order for them to, to look at these operators and tell them, okay, we would like to keep with what is going on in the globe, and we would like to get real broadband as well. So that's just something to think about.
So if you read between the lines in what Shernon is saying,
Yes, he's a diplomat. Just like one that speaks like
lines
one.
a bit. If you read between the lines of what he's saying, I think starts with a definition of broadband, which really gets into a definition of what do you want. So before you can even discuss where should Belize be, the first question is where does Belize want to be?
Do you want high speed or broadband?
Well, I go beyond broadband. Do you want real internet or technology-based development or not? Because if you want real internet or technology-based development, there are things that have to be done. And it goes beyond simply putting billboards up, advertising or promising speeds that are actually not attainable when you do real measurement. So what we have to look at then is, there's a definition of broadband, yes, but that definition has been changing year on year. So some countries define broadband as 100 megs. When you set that definition, you set a target for your service providers, and you set expectation for your consumers. There is no definition for broadband in Belize.
Wow.
Really?
So if the provider says X, any provider, I'm not going to call anyone out because that's not necessary.
I can call 2 if you like.
But even if you did, they're not the ones to set the broadband, that standard. Right? That can be set by the government as a public service responsibility, or by the regulator as part of their protection of consumer interests.
So I mean, you're referring to the Public Utilities Commission in Belize.
Public Utilities Commission or the government of Belize.
Okay.
And not any particular party. The government of Belize.
The government of Belize, of course.
So,
the ministry.
Correct. And once that is set, it obligates the service providers. If it is not set, the service providers can essentially pick a speed relative to their profit margins, their economic interests, their strategic plans, their infrastructure rollout, their capex, whatever they choose. Correct. They just pick something. The standard should be set objectively and independently of private sector interest.
Wow.
That hasn't happened.
Well, we're coming from a culture where we had a monopoly in telecommunications. So could it just be that this is just, we're just slowly shedding skin away into competition? Because if I am one of the players in the market, we only have 2 major ones, and I want to somehow bring the industry up to honesty. And I say, listen, this is not broadband. And we have some commercials in Belize where one company that's what challenged the other one says, measure it. It's not what they're telling you. Could it be that eventually we're going to move into this objective definition?
Well, my question to you is, should it be eventually, perhaps maybe one day? Or
Belize?
should it be, let's make an insistence? Because you are on a moving platform trying to hit a moving target. The world is accelerating. National competitiveness is at stake. Social cohesion is at stake. We just looked at, over the last 2 years, several elections across this planet affected by the internet.
Yes. Yes.
This is not something to come. This is upon us. So any lag, any slowness to respond actually tangibly impacts national development. And that's a serious part of this equation. So a customer, a consumer, a citizen may not know that, well, a faster, better, cheaper internet helps me to be a more productive contributor to society. They may never tell you that in those terms. They want faster internet because faster is better.
But
it has that connection.
I still think that when it comes to internet on a whole, we're ignorant to it because there is no study to it, or even if there is, then it's not like people are actually delving into it. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're not asking the question of exactly what we're getting. We hear the word broadband, we hear the word 4G, LTE, and we just bite the bait because, my goodness, we've got the internet. And the first word is showing us that the internet is actually a good thing. This brings me to my next point, that Shernon mentioned about the poorness when it comes to not having the internet. So back in the day, and we could listen to Mommy, in our minds, things used to be better back then, and everything was okay, and we had this and we had that. And then now we're moving into the era of the internet, which is actually, we're here. And if you don't have it, chances are you will go down. Where did this come from? And we're not being cognizant of it in our country. We're being sold something that is not there. How can we pick ourselves up from this? And I'm asking you guys this because you're the professionals. How can we pick ourselves up from this situation?
I think, again, it's very important. Don't underestimate, let's say, the power of consumers. If you look, okay, again, I'm not going to mention any particular country,
yes.
But there is one country in Latin America, let me mention Latin America, and they don't have competition. So you only have one provider. Normally, the way how we look at it, we are promoting competition because that will give you innovation, better prices, all these kind of things. But we have a real life example, one country in Latin America, only one operator. But given, let's say, the strength of the consumers, they were putting pressure on this particular operator, telling them, okay, although you are the only operator in the country, we would like to get the same services that we are seeing at our neighbors. And that's the case right now. If you look at what that particular monopoly is providing as a service, it's incredible. It's just based on the pressure from the consumer. So that is why I'm saying, don't underestimate the consumers. We need to focus much more, and that's basically what we're doing. We are working with all stakeholders, governments, academia, private sector. But most of the times we are not focusing much on the consumers. And you guys are very powerful, and you can put, let's say, pressure in a positive way, let's say, on all these policymakers in order for them to do what you want. So you can lead as well. As
I just wanted to make a little tweak to what you said. Don't be
Bevil. We have an interpreter. Every time you speak, we have an interpreter.
Interpret. Be mindful of the power of an informed consumer. I think that's the key.
Yes.
The consumer has to be informed. If you have an ignorant consumer or an ignorant market, then those private sector forces and inclinations will do what private sector forces. Yes. That's in their economic interest, market forces, things that the consumers could bear. All those things are related to how much the consumers know they're entitled to or that is available to them. And you made a point that I want to come back to because it's fundamental. If you have a history of not getting much and you get a little more,
expectation,
you feel, wow, somebody loves me, this is awesome. But there's so much more that can be had.
Yes.
And I wanted to make reference to something that happened a couple of years ago here in Belize. There was another survey that came out of the Caribbean that showed Belize at the bottom of the ladder. I think there was only Haiti below Belize in terms of internet service pricing and internet quality. Those survey results were brought to Belize and basically declared, this is where you actually are. Yeah. And the government at the time, whether it is out of shame, whether it is out of an incentive to do better, whatever the motive, decided to put pressure on the service provider because they had objective information. And that led to that first, I don't know if you remember, when the prices went down and the speed went up.
It was a September.
In an instant.
Yes.
That came out of a survey result showing the regional rankings. Now that survey came out in the Caribbean quietly, and it had to be literally held up and, guys, this is where things are.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that because that same place is where we are now. Another such revelation, objective needs to be brought to the public's attention, to the attention of decision makers, and to the attention of the industry to say there is more that needs to be done for us to rank where we really need to be in the grand scheme.
I want to go back to costs because as we were talking before, the justification in the past in terms of pricing was that Belize has a small consumer base. So if you're selling gas to 25 people and you have to have a big gas station with all of the infrastructure, then gas has to be more expensive. But you have a different view in terms of whether or not population size should justify where we are in terms of pricing. Can you share that with the public?
I reject the notion that size is the only or most significant determinant of cost out of hand. Shernon, my colleague here, is from Curacao. Population
160,000.
160,000.
Half of it.
Average internet download speed
20 meg.
Wow. Right?
Professionals again.
So I'm going to let him go
20
first.
megs.
Yeah.
Okay, 20 megs in Curacao, half of the population of Belize. And while you guys are professionals, I'm sure you guys have done your studies. What's the download speed in Belize, or the speed in Belize, the internet speed?
I think it's around 8 or
Somewhere around there, less than 10.
Yeah, it's less than 10.
And the cost comparatively in US dollars?
I'm not sure about it.
It's about 2 times as much in Belize.
Thereabouts.
Wow.
Yeah. Thereabouts. I mean, I can get the specific figures will be easily findable online.
Yes.
But yeah. But you're well below the regional average.
I want to be fair, so I want to ask, is there any way to justify where Belize is in terms of cost and speed? If you're the service providers, how can you justify this?
Oh, that's a relatively easy one to justify. I can let the diplomat give you the diplomatic.
No, I want to dry.
The dry answer is it's what the market is bearing, has been bearing, and continues to bear. Therefore, why change it?
So we're being exploited.
Long and short.
Is it exploitation if you don't say stop?
Yes, if you're not being, as you said, if you are telling me that I should be aware, a slave didn't know that you could tell the slave master, no.
Yes.
It was somebody who told him, hey, become aware, you don't have to take
You don't have to do this, yes.
So, yes, it is, in my book, exploitation.
Yes, but I think we have a key role to play here as well. And I think we need to focus a bit on collaboration. Because I think collaboration. Because I think governments, I don't think any government would like to harm their citizens, you know. So I think it's very important. Sometimes they don't know what is going on elsewhere. So that is why we are here, and we are trying to work with them.
In this case, he's actually correct and direct. And I want to use that same report from a couple years ago.
Shernon. Shernon. I respect your diplomacy. However, we have ministries whose own, they're being paid to do nothing else but simply to monitor what the international global standards are and to regulate them locally. We have a Public Utilities Commission whose sole function, if they don't know that, then we're wasting taxpayers' money. I, out of hand, reject that. Sorry.
No, again, but I think we are here to work with them.
Do you agree with me?
I think we're here to work with them to reach the next level.
I like it. Yes. We're going to elect you.
So guys, while we're on the topic, and of course it is the Caribbean Peering and Interconnection Forum. Let's talk about the forum. Let's hit that up. In terms of a forum, of course, we're inviting folks to come on out. What is the forum about, and who can be there? When is it?
The forum actually started yesterday and continues today, concludes this evening. The Caribbean Peering and Interconnection Forum really is set up to address these fundamental issues of what's the economics. You keep asking cost and what determines it. The economics of the internet is such that the lower the cost of the delivery of traffic between any two networks connected on the internet, the better the quality and the easier it is for the providers of those interconnected networks to pass those savings on to the consumer. So what the Peering Forum essentially is set up to do is to bring those parties together. You have major internet content providers, Facebook, Google, big networks like Netflix, Hulu, and these guys, who have content that people in the Caribbean consume, that people in Belize consume. And then you have the network operators who run networks that connect those customers on their network to this content that they think they want. But there's a missing component, and that component is local content, like this program, which is being aired, I think, online, as well as being broadcast over the traditional cable and television network. That is local content. That is digital content that should also be on the internet, not someone else's internet, but the local internet. And that brings us to a big issue that, again, is not widely discussed. What's the local internet? Is there such a thing? The local internet is where the value is first created. So if you think about this program and the fact that when you're broadcasting it, you probably have your servers outside of Belize. You probably use networks that are outside of Belize. And then you have people in Belize who are looking at it, who pull it back from outside into Belize.
Like sugar, export it to Belize.
So it's the equivalent of going to Miami to get to Belmopan. So if you wanted to get to Belmopan, would you go through the Miami International Airport? You shouldn't, but that's what you're doing with your broadcast for this.
And that has a cost implication as well.
It has every implication of if you personally went from Belize City to Miami to get to Belmopan. It is stupid. Let's start with that.
Time wasting.
It is expensive. It is time consuming. It is inefficient. And all of the things that I gave in that list that would apply to you personally if you made such a journey, right? The cost, the waste of time, the frustration of waiting in the airport in transit happens to your traffic if you don't improve your local internet.
Interesting.
Wow.
Right? That now gets to the issue of how do you reduce the cost and increase the quality for consumers here in Belize. So last year, or year before last year, Belize actually established an internet exchange point to address some of that. So that now exists here in Belize City. There are talks and considerations for moving a similar facility to Belmopan and other parts of the country. But for those things to work, providers have to connect it, right? the internet service providers have to connect so that any traffic that is intended for the local market stays within the local market. What happens when that happens? It's faster, it's cheaper, it's better.
Those are 3 buzzwords.
Yeah.
So was that what you were referring to when you said Belize is a quiet success story?
Yeah.
Was that what you were referring to?
That's part of it. So the building blocks for a better Belize internet are in place. The building blocks. So it's like we're on a foundation site. We did some of the heavy lifting. So the network providers have been building out their networks. An exchange point has been established, but there's still some missing elements. We still don't have the plans for the full house.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I found interesting though, as you go back to something you said, you were talking about some of the industry bigwigs, Facebook, Google, and Netflix. Because Belize, again, there's been increase in prices, and so the cable providers in Belize, they've tacked on another $10 on it. And for Belizeans, it's an amount. It's something. It's a 20% increase based on my math.
Yeah.
So people are actually moving towards higher utilization of the internet to get their entertainment, especially television. A lot of people, some of the richer ones, are moving towards Netflix. You're telling us that last year they were part of the forum.
Correct.
And this year they also participated again by live stream. What is the attention that they're placing towards the usage and to forums like this because of the market size of the Caribbean? I know for movies, one of the reasons we have a lot of piracy in Belize is because some of the bigger companies in the States say, market is too small. If we send somebody down there,
The cost of sending them is more than
more than
Yeah.
How involved and how much does the market of the Caribbean appeal to these sorts of entities and their input in the sort of work that you guys do?
Let me just take this one. Coming, for example, from a small island, 160,000 inhabitants, I think I can give you some examples. Yeah. Back then, when we, let's say, did install the IXP, Internet Exchange Point, basically no one was interested in doing anything with us. But as soon as we had the Internet Exchange Point in place, then we started to get, let's say, the Googles, the Akamais, the Netflix, all knocking at our doors. Because basically on these islands, they too have, let's say, customers. So what they're trying to do now is just to put, let's say, what we call the cash much closer to the customers. So in that regard, size doesn't count, because, I mean, as long as they have their customers in a given jurisdiction, they are much eager to go and then to install their caches. So the first thing that first should be done is to install, let's say, the IXP. Because if you don't have that, I mean, they will not talk to you. So you need to first do that, Internet Exchange Point. So once you have that in place, you will attract all these big guys. And that's the way how it has been going in the wider Caribbean as well. And I think that's the way how we can approach it in Belize as well.
All right. Well, guys, while the conversation,
John, can I ask one more? Can I ask one more thing, John?
Sure.
I can't get these guys off without asking this. My focus is selfishly this country, and as much as I appreciate the experience of the Caribbean, I think we first have to deal with home first, and then we can expand afterwards. A very Malcolm X-like approach to it. But as you leave, you're here regularly. But as you leave today, and you have opened your eyes to a lot of things, including the fact that we have made steps, and you have been very complimentary in terms of the efforts that we're making, but you have also been very realistic to say that we've made steps forward, but compared to how the train is moving, y'all are still at the back. In leaving, what advice would you give to consumers and to the government as to how to make the leap forward so that we're no longer in the bottom third, and I think we're very diplomatic, I think we're second to last.
Yeah.
To get to middle of the bunch, how can we make a giant step? What is your advice to move to where, on average, we should be in a very short period?
So first, let me say that I don't see a movement from the bottom third to the middle of the bunch as being any reasonable objective. You can get to the top of the pile. Is that achievable and attainable a goal? But there are some things that need to be done. One of the things that need to be done, we've been discussing it throughout this conversation, is awareness, information, knowledge, just an understanding of the economic fundamentals of the internet economy. And I'm saying the internet economy knowing and hoping that you understand that it touches every other aspect of the economy. So addressing this particular area creates benefits in finance, in tourism, in agriculture, in any one of the other engines of the national economy. So getting the fundamentals right is important. Getting the fundamentals right gets back to the issue of how we incentivize people not just to use the internet or to connect to the internet, but to create local value from the internet. Yeah. That is the key. So you have to look at things that incentivize businesses that take advantage of the local internet. You have to create an environment where it is easy to establish services that take advantage of the local internet. Those create local efficiencies. Those create local economic value. That local economic value is what cascades up into national and then regional and then global possibilities. But you have to start local. I applaud your selfish perspective on it because it is the same perspective that has given us some of these internet giants that we applaud today.
Of course.
Their first problem wasn't global, was local.
Yeah.
So there are issues that we have to address that deal with specific local challenges that can be alleviated if we use the technology right. And that's where we need to begin.
Thank you. And just to add to what Bevil said, I think it's also very important to start using the local domain name much more. Okay. The .bz is the identity of the local community, so you should start using that much more.
So Debbie Turton has a lot of work to do locally.
Absolutely. Yes. She and others.
Bevil Wooding, Shernon, Osepa, guys, thank you so very much. It was nice having you in.
Thank you.
Eye-opening experience for us.
Thank you.
When we come back, the Belize Chamber of Commerce is going to be with us. Made in Belize. That's the next conversation. Stay with us.